We're going to get started by just intros. So if we want to go ahead and start down on the other side of the table, introduce yourself and kind of your thoughts and maybe any pertinent background you have when it comes to this panel.
All right, my name is Stuart Grosse. I am a writer in the game lit or lit RPG space. I do villains as protagonists, specifically supervillains most of the time. So bad people doing bad things for fun and profit, and they win.
Yay!
And so what background I have to this is that my characters cause lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of property damage, sometimes on planetary scales.
Property Damage Playhouse.
Hey folks, my name is Daviorr Snipes. I'm the Director of Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access at the Alliance Theater. So looking at diversity, equity, and access, I'm kind of looking at the extent of damage, mostly like emotionally and mentally.
Emotional damage!
Yes, and so also Peabody Award-winning voice and stage actor as well for the last 30 years.
Woo, love it.
I write under the name Wayland Smith, unless you really hate this panel, and then my name is Jim Butcher. He knows I do the joke. My series of overqualifications for this particular panel, I review all superhero TV and movies for a website called Comic Book Clog. I didn't name it, I just work there. I've been reading comics steadily since the 80s. I used to co-own a comic book shop. One of my novel series is about superhuman mercenaries, and out there in the real world, when I'm not at DragonCon, I've been with the sheriff's office for 22 years, including being on the emergency response team, teaching hand-to-hand, and teaching pepper spray. So I guess I kind of get experience on both ends of this.
Awesome. So my name is Brandy. I have a master's degree in terrorism and political violence, and my master's thesis was on the relationship between Star Wars and terrorism. So I love to combine popular culture and politics and international issues, security issues, all that kind of stuff. But what really qualifies me to be on this panel is that I worked in Bank of America's Emergency Management Center for several years. So I've actually kind of seen the impacts that large-scale events can have on both the corporate side, on the people side, because I worked more on the employee impact side than on the financial side, but I also did kind of see that. So yeah, I'm really excited for us to have this panel and talk about it. If you heard me kind of ramble there and you were like, I don't understand what she did. If you've seen The Boys, you know, the people they keep at the basement, that like crime intelligence, that's kind of what I did.
And I am Jeni Green, professional nerd like my friend Jenna, but I am uniquely qualified as I have been a licensed property and casualty insurance person for 15 years. So this is sort of my bread and butter, what I deal with every day. Currently, I am on the commercial side of things, which is a huge part of kind of the damage that we see in superhero movies. So yeah, any kinds of thoughts we have as we go along. Again, I said it earlier, we definitely want you guys to be engaged. So as we're talking, you know, we'll throw out a couple of things up here, but if you guys have questions, any information you want to add, things like that, this is definitely going to be a big discussion. If any of you were in the law panel last year, same vibe. That's exactly what we're going for here. So, first thing I wanted to ask, is there anyone in the audience currently who works in emergency response, insurance, anything of that nature? Do we have anybody? Yes. Perfect.
See you, buddy.
Great. So, panelists, one of the things I wanted to talk about, let's start with, obviously, scenes. Places in media where we have seen the big, large-scale damage, and see what scenes kind of stick out to you guys.
Oh, I think about the battle for New York in the Avengers. I mean, or just like anything in New York. We keep destroying that poor place, like even in The Boys, I'm assuming, yeah, they're like, New York, whatever. Godzilla, he's always, poor New York. And I mean, I'm watching that and I'm like, what are we doing? And then I think about, Batman versus Superman when they're like fighting, and Batman's like, do no harm, I'm not going to kill anyone, I don't use guns, and I'm like, but the amount of property damage that you're doing?
Yep. 100%.
I'll do a compare and contrast, and this will also illustrate why I think one movie was so much better than the other. The Avengers. You've got, help the people, keep the property damage under control. We're going to drive the aliens back and keep them in the center. You've got the Man of Steel, where there are people trapped in the rubble all around you, probably dying. You have senses that could help them. Let's go make out with my new girlfriend.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the granddaddy for me, and it's so funny that there are so many examples that we could pull from, but the granddaddy is Man of Steel, and where literally Superman and Zod literally just lay waste to Metropolis, and it is literally a dust bowl by the time the fight stops, and there's just no, I mean, yeah, and due to public outcry, they try to deal with it in Batman v Superman, but just the amount of damage and just the inconsequential response that Superman of all people just has, like, oh, we just destroyed an entire building. Was there anybody in there? So just the lack of concern of the bodies that were probably affected by the damage that was done was just mind blowing to me. So that's the granddaddy.
For me, I'm going to go away from the more modern superheroes to, the original Godzilla.
Yeah.
Where Godzilla's just stomping through Tokyo, picks up a train, tosses it around. It's like, and the trains in, Tokyo are always packed full of people. Like, they push people in to compact them in like sardines. So throwing those trains around, that's a ton of people dead.
Yeah, it's overpopulated anyway.
Yeah, and I think one of the ones for me that I think about is the arrival of the children of Thanos in Infinity War. So I mean, his clothes today is tattooed on my arm, so there's a whole thing. With audience participation, raise your hand. We're gonna make keep it one at a time. We'll definitely call on everybody. So.
Whoever I was talking to, the Marvel comic I couldn't remember. It's called Damage Control, and it did make a cameo in Homecoming. I knew I wasn't being crazy. It's really good.
They're not
It's
mutually
like,
exclusive.
It's 89, I think is when it started, and I just remembered the name of it, and it's really good. It's really good, like limited series.
All right, we have one back there.
Shout out.
I recall reading an article back when Man of Steel came out, comparing it to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the writers apparently specifically went for larger damage.
There's superhuman and there's superhero, and they're starting to illustrate the difference between the two.
And I'm sorry, I don't want to.
No, go ahead.
Well, and the thing that's interesting, that annoys me about it so much is that it's been done so much that it now is just meaningless, because it's like, I can get at one point it was done to try to show you what is the level of strength that these people have, that they're wrestling with. But now it's just past that, and now it's just like empty destruction that really just, because it's so empty, there's no there to it, and I'm just looking for them to have some kind of weight to, there is a cost, because I think back to the original, was it Superman 2, when there's this big thing where Superman is fighting the trio, and he's constantly saying, well, what about the people? What about the people? And so, and like, that was back in what was that, 80? 1980 when that was?
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, and it's just like, now that's not even a thought. I don't know if that's a reflection on us as a society, that we don't care about the people in those buildings, or what that might be, but just the emptiness of the destruction is what I always think about.
Okay, yep.
So, in Pacific Rim, they put everybody in shelters. The Egyptian Rangers walking down the street and crushing people's cars. And every time I see it, and this is for the insurance people, I'm like, what do they do?
I will say we are going to get into a lot of that. We're going to touch on how are things covered, are they covered, stuff like that. So hold that one, because we're going to dig in for sure on that one. Black shirt.
Referring to what he was saying about what this says about society, I think that this says a bit more on like the writing team behind the film, because it's just kind of impressive, because the film was so divisive. It made I think it's like Mark Miller or someone say, oh wow, this is what my work inspired. I should probably take a step back and lighten my work.
Yeah. Awesome.
We'll go right here.
Yeah, what always fascinates me is how fast the buildings are repaired afterwards.
Oh yeah.
It's like, one day they're smashed, next day, there they are
It's not
again.
realistic.
Maybe that's why
Didn't
Michael
expect
Keaton
them
was
to
so
not
angry.
have construction workers with superpowers.
I'm going to go black shirt right here.
Well, you were saying that, where does this all come from? Where we've gotten to the point where it's like, we're like competing with who can destroy the most, and I really feel like that comes mostly from studios, because that sells movies better. Like if they can like show like in the trailers or something, like the more destruction, the better the movie sells.
For sure. I'm gonna go blue here.
And when y'all start answering, can y'all try and differentiate between the Battle for New York, aliens showed up? You know, that's kind of a whole different thing, whereas there are a lot of, you know, good guy, bad guy movies where they're just regular people, like in, not Wakanda, but the first, you know, when, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the street market.
It's just like, you know, people destroying stuff because
100%.
You know, because they're your.
We're gonna have to get to some hypotheticals there, but
yeah.
I'm gonna, I think, do like one or two more in this, and then we'll move on to some of the specifics. Go ahead, right here.
Okay, so the thing is, there's an anime, My Hero Academia, that just does not. It completely understands the whole thing. Like, there are kids training to be superheroes, and they are very specifically chided about the fact that you are not supposed to create property damage. It lowers your rating. It even lowers your rating, like, as a hero to, like, on property damage.
Insurance person.
Yeah.
I think there was one more back there.
I like
Yep, black shirt right there.
Kind of piggybacking off of the other gentleman's question.
Yelp for those.
In superhero media, there's been a division between been a conversation of like, oh, the Marvel characters for a while were all like paramilitary dress and organization and whatnot, and then you have the street level heroes. In a realistic superhero world, I can see a version of this where, oh, you have your big scale superheroes, Iron Man and whatnot, who only deal with big like alien invasions, and that could be covered by insurance. But then, especially with how laws go, would they just try to abolish street level people in general because of the nature of, oh, you have authority, you broke into this person's thing, what's inadmissible in court, like just don't deal with it at all, don't deal with coverage at all.
That was the start of Watchmen.
And this is also how we got here from last year to this year, was the law questions into this panel. Yeah, so let's tackle a little bit of that. Let's start high level a little bit. So obviously, for anyone who is an insurance person here, feel free, raise your hand, chime in as we start talking about this stuff too. There is a difference between commercial insurance and personal/residential insurance. So how someone's house would be covered is very different than how a commercial building would be covered, or commercial property versus personal property. Commercial insurance, for example, commercial property insurance, has a terrorism exclusion built into it. And so, and that is actually, so we'll go a little historical on that. That came about, unfortunately, as a result of the 9/11 attacks. Because of there was so much, think about how much property damage was done on 9/11. The insurance companies would have gone absolutely bust. And the government, people don't actually know this. The government had to step in and reinsure this. So as a result, the government, basically federal government, said there's got to be a restriction on what we can do. So commercial property insurance has what in the industry we call TRIA. And you either exclude or include. And when you include, you pay extra for that. So you can get into the argument, you probably, and you could see a lot of insurance companies trying to class almost all hero/villain activity as terrorism. Because domestic terrorism is terrorism. It doesn't matter. So you could be an American citizen and you could be a good guy, but that could still be, in my opinion, could be considered terrorism. But you also then get into with your kind of comment, are they sanctioned by the government? Are they doing it on their own? Because governmental action, also a fun exclusion. So there's a lot of gray area. Yeah, the government can do basically whatever they want to your property and kind of not a lot of help for you.
Well, that's, before we jump to that,
yes.
I think that's why I think The Boys is so interesting in how it has involved politics and politicians into the situation, and Homelander very much trying to work with the Senate because he knows that if I have them supporting me, then I truly have carte blanche. And I think that will be something like in the see more in the hero world. Maybe we can see that come into maybe future movies. I don't think they will, because I think they will see that as, oh, that's boring and it takes away from the reality of what we're doing. It takes away from the fun of what we're doing. But you would truly need like a political activist who was like someone who was behind the nature of the superheroes to make sure that insurance policies would not be able to just eradicate people from having protection. Yeah. Because they would see it as they have to be able to do their job, they have to be able to protect us, and people still have to be able to afford insurance. But thinking about having a political activist in that position who would do that in our modern world is a very unrealistic thought.
Yeah.
So.
Or they jack up the premiums, like, oh, you decided to have a home in South Florida.
That's it.
Well, you can choose to either. Oh, and you want to be protected from hurricanes. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Anyone else on the stage?
They touched on that a little bit in the background, if I'm remembering correctly, in The Incredibles.
Yeah.
That was part of why they drove around in the first place.
I was casually talking to someone yesterday and they mentioned that.
Yeah, I think The Incredibles is a really good, interesting case of it, because I feel like and I think if we start talking about is it worth it, I feel like Bob thought it was worth it, because he like both worked in the insurance industry and worked on the street level as a superhero. And the other thing that I'm thinking about as we're talking about these terrorism inclusions, which also I want to get into the definition of terrorism, but that's not really related.
It is though.
Okay, all right. So anyway, when we talk about the definition of terrorism, there are tons and tons and tons of arguments about what is and isn't terrorism. And one of my favorite quotes is from a British politician. He said, terrorism, it's kind of brought in, but he said they were trying to define porn at the same time, and he said, I'll know what porn is when I see it. And so a lot of people take that kind of thought with terrorism, but to me, terrorism is anything that is done to gain a political advantage, a kind of social advantage. So there are definitely instances where we can define the good guys as committing terrorism. I think Batman is a domestic terrorist. He's a great example of a domestic terrorist. He's using terrorism to control Gotham. I could do a whole panel on that. But the other thing that I wanted to say was that when we're also talking about like exclusions, I always think about the act of God exclusion. So like, how do we?
You are like the fourth person to bring this up.
So like,
casual conversation.
Yeah. So like, Thor is technically a god. So like, anything Thor does is not covered.
Somebody I think actually my roommate brought that up a couple of weeks ago.
I think
when
we
I was
were talking about that
this.
yesterday.
Yeah, because Jenna brought it up. But so it actually, act of God is and isn't excluded. Depends what you're talking about too. So that's the thing is like if you think about personal property insurance, that's all act of God, and that's what's covered basically. But yeah, it's funny. Like, how can you make the argument? It's stuff that if superheroes were real, it would be litigated out the wazoo, and it would be on a case-by-case basis. And then, unfortunately, I think as most of the insurance professionals in this room know, insurance would skyrocket. So, because litigation will just write up the thing. I'm going to try to go through the audience. Put your hands up. I apologize. There's not going to be a perfect order to all of this. I'm going to start high hand in the gray-black right there. Yes.
I think is that with all of these extremes, this would actually force the insurance industry into a corner, because if they try to keep dodging this, eventually everyone's going to get sick of them, and then the entire business is going to collapse. Especially since, superheroes, yes, they're not perfect. They're still well-intentioned. They still have a lot of soft power that they can then squeeze the insurance companies. So if the insurance companies don't bend over, they're just going to be gone within a month.
Or one of the billionaires
that's worked out so well for the insurance companies that continually dodge payments on all sorts of stuff today.
One of the billionaires with the high-tech toys who doesn't want to be a villain starts a superhero insurance company. Then becomes an amazing political powerhouse. That could be a great story.
I think that would be a great way for a doctor. It would never do it. but a Doctor Doom to come into power.
Like like Lex Luthor. I could see
Yes,
Lex running insurance.
You're never gonna back insurance companies into a corner where they just start bending over and paying stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
They'll just start dropping coverage or raising your rates.
They'll cease to exist first.
That's what I meant. That if they start doing that at some point, people are going to go, why buy from them?
That's what I hear all day, every day. I hate to say that to you.
Or also
Why am I paying for this?
They keep paying.
Realistically, maybe don't move to Metropolis. I mean,
that would be
don't
a great.
Live in a floodplain.
You make an excellent point. Like I am not. I want you. Your point is fantastic. You need insurance. Insurance will always exist. It's just what will happen to it. All right, hands up. I'm going to go all the way back. It looks like, is it light gray? Your tall hand.
I'm an insurance defense.
Yes!
Stand up.
So you defend the insurance companies.
Well, we're extremely sympathetic to the problem. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
times where they don't pay, but as far as shocking the insurance company, if you like your mortgage and you live on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, you're friends with Katrina, then you're going to have it because no bank is going to allow you to own a
Yep.
That's exactly it. You're backed into a corner with insurance. And not in a bad way. Listen, I don't know how many of you have ever been in a bad situation, but if you have, I guarantee there's not a one of you that has ever said, I have too much insurance. When you get into a bad situation, you will realize how much your insurance will typically do for you. Let me see hands. Let me see. I'll actually go right next door. Because I think you said you were in insurance as well.
Yeah, I actually do defend the insurance companies.
We won't boo you.
One exclusion we haven't talked about that I think would come into play, particularly with maybe the Marvel aliens coming out of the sky scene, is the war exclusion.
Yep. Yeah. War.
I think that probably did satisfy the requirements of the war. Godzilla, not so much.
Yep.
So that's natural.
For sure.
Yeah, but I mean, the whole system depends on coverage. The first time this happens, carriers are going to fail or the government's going to step in, like 9/11.
That's yeah.
And carriers failing is really bad for lots of people.
Yep.
Because then these side claims don't get paid. That would have nothing to do with the catastrophe.
Yeah.
But anyway, after it happens a couple of times, the carriers will
Figure it out.
and they'll do like you said. There's assault and battery exclusions already because third-party black law is insane in Georgia. So if you have a hotel, you have trouble getting that coverage.
Yep.
So they'll adjust.
They will. And that's why I brought the 9/11 example up right away.
Or to quote somebody else, insurance finds a way.
That's going on over the next year. Caroline, hold on. Actually, Caroline, go ahead.
I just wanted to go back to the bit about rebuilding. I have a couple of friends who are engineers, and they work exclusively out of New York City, so I could actually get some real numbers on this. Not counting having to deal with all the demolition of buildings, clearing out rubble, all of that. The answer that I got about budget and time frames. Plans and permitting are about 12 to 18 months for a skyscraper. Construction 2 to 3 years. Cost about a couple $100 million until you start approaching 1,000 feet, and then it crosses into the billions.
Yeah.
So that's what we're looking at for each skyscraper that goes down and needs to be rebuilt, basically.
And I promise, I'm just standing so I can see all the hands. I'm not trying to be a weirdo.
You can do both.
Back right corner. Gray, I think gray shirt.
A lot of times, insurance will impose risk mitigation requirements above local, federal standard laws. What sort of requirements do you see insurance companies imposing if they're going to be covering superhuman-related events?
You guys want to drop?
I can kind of drop into this because I kind of worked a little bit in risk mitigation. Because one of the things that I did was like look at what upcoming things were happening that could affect the employees or the bank, and that included, major protest, major events, hurricanes, weather events, all that kind of stuff. So I think some of the things that they're going to try to do is they're going to try to work with the government to regulate who can operate legally, so that they can then go after people who are not. Maybe you have to have superhero insurance to operate. And if you don't have that insurance, you can be prosecuted.
This is another parallel that just popped into my head, and I'm going to sound like I'm making a joke, but I'm actually serious about this one. I think it'd be interesting to look at what happens in insurance rates in cities when the Olympics comes to town.
Yeah.
Because you've got tons more traffic, tons more people, you're going to strain emergency services, and that could be sort of analogous to the Battle of New York in Marvel or something like that. You've got all this unexpected, unanticipated load on everything, and they have to find a way to make that work.
Well, and major sporting events cause an uptick in crime, and one of the things that we really had to watch out for when the DNC came into town a couple years ago into Charlotte, we had to put more security officers on the ground because there's such an uptick in street level crime and also things like human trafficking, and so you needed more people on the ground watching for that sort of thing happening.
And none of those people are working for free, and for most of us it ends up being what they call an off-duty detail, which means we're getting time and a half the whole time we're out there. Watch that screw your budget.
That's a whole, that is a cost too that definitely figures in with everything we're talking about.
And Brandy, right?
Yeah.
And Brandy, and also what we also see just the eradication of mom and pop stores.
Yeah.
Because it's in something like that, they could not be able to afford. So basically, any company or corporation that's in existence would all have to be the uppermost of what they are, the richest places. Yeah. So any kind of independent shop would just be eradicated from all major cities.
Yeah, absolutely. And big corporations like Bank of America, they have a huge emergency services division. So they would step in. I mean, I don't work there anymore. When I did work there, they would step in for when people were displaced because of hurricanes, even before FEMA got there. And they have the ability to do that. But they only want to spend so much money on that. They're going to want to depend on the government. They're going to want to depend on insurance companies to do that with superheroes. So yeah, no, you're definitely right. Mom and pop shops are gone. They're not coming back.
I'm going to go right here.
So I work in the professional negligence legal field. So I was thinking about Brandy's suggestion of superheroes, having to get superhero malpractice insurance.
Superhero E&O, man. There would be such a market for that. Supermarket E&O. Superhero
That could lead to only the wealthy group of superheroes, so Batman, Iron
Yes.
Man, etc.
Yeah.
Being able to function because they're the only ones who can pay what I assume
Could
would be
afford
very
it.
high premium.
Yeah, they would have to
Unless
have.
there were a government team, with government-sponsored heroes, then the government would be picking up the tab instead of individuals.
I'm going to throw a major wrench in this plan. So what if me, as Dr. Horrible, I have a whole bunch of money and I pay for superhero insurance, but I'm not using my powers for good? What then? Where does the insurance company keep the line as to who gets coverage and who doesn't?
I don't think they care. As long as you are not violating your contract and you're paying your premiums, pretty sure you're fine.
You cannot benefit from a crime, right? Wouldn't that be a benefit?
Can't violate the law.
Right, but the thing about it is they'll write it until you mess up. So that's if you come and I want to be a bad guy, as long as you meet the criteria at the time, they'll write it, and then when you breach or violate your contract, then they'll yank it from you.
Oh, smart.
Yeah. Oh, so many hands. I love it all. My red horns in the back.
So I had a couple of thoughts. One is that it's sort of in line with what we're hearing and what we've seen in the situation in Florida. If New York gets destroyed once, that's one thing. But if we have these universes where New York and major cities get destroyed multiple times, it's not just the insurance company going to destroy, but you have the situation like where you have in Florida, only worse, because you have people who are effectively trapped there because they can't afford to move, they can't afford to pay for the replacement of their homes. You have the financial cost, the resource cost of extracting, the mining, the iron and the mineral needed to make steel, make concrete, rebuild buildings. I think if this is a thing where we have a world of superheroes, I think that major population centers.
Yeah. 100%.
Unless, of course, you also mitigate those things with other superpowers.
How do you mean?
Well, if you have superpowers, there are some that you could use to do deep sea mining. Okay. Much easier than what we can do now.
Or asteroid mining.
Asteroid mining. You also have people who could, use different powers to reform the building from all the scraps. or if you have anyone with time manipulation, you rewind the building to before it was destroyed. So it's a lot of different. So people are thinking only about the smash, boom, bang powers.
Okay.
But there's a lot of other superpowers out there that could be applied to this.
So you're telling me the Green Lantern Corps could go to like a different planet and bring in material maybe that's unbreakable that can rebuild things faster than...
And the comic she was talking about, damage control, that they were people who had powers that they used for construction and for stuff like that.
But if we do that, we potentially cause, like if we were doing deep sea diving, mining, and we don't really know the environmental impacts of that, we might be making the environmental disasters worse. So then we have another insurance issue.
So Aquaman deals with
Jeni's like, I was excited for Brandy to be on this panel, and now I'm like, no, go away.
What? Modern society causing environmental problems?
That would never happen.
But to Horn's point, I mean, that was something that I was thinking about earlier, is that like those major cities are just no longer a destination for travel, for existence, for businesses at all, unless you're like the absolute major corporations who can benefit on that.
Actually, okay, here's a bizarre thought, and it is mostly a joke, but I'm halfway serious. In a world like that, where you're dealing with this sort of stuff, would people like Flo and her crew become low-level heroes in an extent? No, I'm serious.
I am absolutely a hero. What are you talking about?
Interesting.
I mean, people have been dressing up as her this weekend. I heard one of my roommates was in the elevator with a whole
I was
going
to do Jake from State Farm for today, but I really was.
You could get like the little insurance legion there. You could have Jake and Flo and whoever all else.
All right.
And the State Farm jingle people who like, oh, State Farm's there, boom, and they teleport.
They
you
actually
away from
appear.
the car on the ledge.
Oh, I like it.
State Farm, insurance of superheroes. I love it. I'm gonna go right here.
So we saw a little bit of this Spider-Man Homecoming. The Vulture's plot line is New York said, all right, I'm going to contract you to do demolition. The federal government immediately took over, so they get their hands on the stuff. So then you're going to have the government, and I could absolutely see the federal government coming in and say, we want all this stuff. We're going to take control, a whole bunch of political leaders, and then they use all the toys for themselves.
And then that turned into a supervillain origin, because that's how you ended up with the Vulture in that movie.
Absolutely.
Yep. Great point.
Blue t-shirt. Yes.
So, about a year ago, there was a trend on TikTok about Gotham versus Metropolis. It was all people living an average life there. And there was things like, well, yes, I live in Gotham, and sure, I get mugged all the time. And I could go live in Metropolis, where at least Wayne Enterprises rebuilds everything after a supervillain rolls through. But I just can't afford that cost of living.
Yeah, like
there was a bunch of hilarious comments like that my wife would read to me.
Yeah, like the difference between Gotham and Metropolis is Gotham, you'll run into Scarecrow and Joker. Metropolis, you run into Darkseid. Which one is better?
You might have a chance of punching out the Scarecrow.
Yeah, you might not come into Joker's, view if you're not funny.
Well, but I actually think that's a legit point, because you look at something like the Scarecrow. I mean, look, in both cases, there's extreme mental and emotional damage, but you're talking about Scarecrow giving you your worst nightmare scenario example. I mean, that's something that could affect you for the entirety of your existence, and just like how you mentally cope with anything. So in either case, it's a damned decision.
There was a great
one has the insurance companies paying out for skyscrapers, and the other one is we can say it's a prior condition.
There was a great meme I saw the other day, something to the effect of like random civilian wondering why so many supervillains are docked or whatever, and other people have been through the program going, paying off student loans? No, I totally get it.
I'm right here.
All right. First, I just want to mention with the comments about reconstructing things. In one of the older Superman movies, didn't he have an I-beam that just fixed the Great Wall of China?
Repair the Wall of China vision. Yeah, yes. That was.
Yes, he did.
That was an interesting choice.
That's my main thing. I just felt someone had to say it.
No, yes, he did.
I work Superman that's ever had.
I get this because I'm actually writing a superhero novel myself, and these superheroes are actually all government agents. They're part of a 3-letter agency. I was kind of wondering how, you know, it's one thing trying to argue with the insurance company because, you know, like, you parked your car by a fire hydrant and the firefighters broke your window so that they could bleed the hose through. It's another thing when some guy, you know, creates a tornado trying to stop a villain and your car's been thrown 6 blocks and it's trying to figure out, you know, how do you handle insurance at that point?
Well, if there's a tornado, your car would be okay. You're a tornado. If a tornado got your car, it would likely be covered. Likely,
even if it was caused by a supervillain.
Exactly.
Also, so
that's
wait.
the question. That's
yes.
the question.
Okay. All right.
Hero or villain? Yes, because here's an interesting take.
Okay, Jen.
In case any of you who live where the earth shakes, an earthquake. Even if you don't have earthquake insurance, but if an earthquake breaks a line and causes a fire, your house burned down because of a fire.
Yep.
So you have coverage.
Come get one of my cards.
So you have to torch your house real quick?
No. Don't say things like that to
But going back to your thing about the government superheroes, there's actually a webcomic I follow called Girl Power, GRRL Power. It's about this government super team. They also put in a law that said no vigilantes. So, you know, the government team is training, and one of the things they're doing in the training for this new person that just came on board is telling them, okay, you look at what you're shooting at and what's behind it, and they showed a orphanage, and if you're going to try and throw somebody, you throw them into the street because the street is probably less likely to cause problems, even if you break the water main, than throwing them through the building and causing so much chaos.
Except there's going to be some idiot out there filming all this. You know that on their phone. At the end of the panel, come get one of my cards. I will happily talk writing superheroes with you, probably until you're sick of it.
Yes, me too.
I will not be sick of it, but okay.
All right, I'm going to bounce right here.
So you mentioned that commercial buildings have a terrorism waiver in their policy. What happens in a world where nowadays we have so many mixed-use buildings that have a condo and downstairs Joker blows up the bank?
It's a great question.
I have homeowners insurance, but the building overall is So would we change zoning laws?
Do any of my insurance people in the room want to talk about that? I don't feel like I need to always be. Anyone?
Bueller?
No? Okay.
I would
No.
think
He's
it
got,
would-
there we go.
I think it would
Here we go.
probably, like,
Who? Go for it.
It's going to come down to your condominium agreement.
Correct.
And whether the condominium association owns the building or the commercial area underneath owns the building.
It's tricky.
The walls are not typically owned by the owners of the condo. They're typically owned by the association, which is a conglomerate legal organization of the condo owners. And it has its own insurance for that property, that common elements property. So it's a very complicated question, but the bottom line is it's going to be some type of commercial policy.
Yeah.
Oh, God, and we thought HOAs were bad now.
One of the biggest parts of my book of business is mixed use commercial, and exactly it's going to depend the commercial part of it. So likely the walls will be covered under whatever commercial policy is covering it, as long as you have terrorism. Your homeowner's policy actually doesn't exclude terrorism. So your walls they'll rebuild it, but if the outside walls don't get rebuilt, so you'll get made whole as an individual.
All the stuff you had in your condo would probably be covered.
Yeah.
But
you can't rebuild because you can't drywall on something that ain't there no more.
Again, this is all hypothetical. Do not take this as insurance advice. All hypothetical.
Don't take advice from any of us. It's probably
not even
a good
me.
plan.
I'm a good influence.
Yes, my other attorney.
It's called HO6 insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
If you're a condominium unit owner, you cover the stuff inside your walls. That includes your appliances and so forth. But once you get the skin on the other side of the
You look really excited over here. I'm coming to Green Shirt next.
And then your commercial property fixed in. And you pay that once a year with your condo association.
Yep.
So, yeah, it would be a big old mess.
Yeah.
Does it cover the building?
Yeah.
And then does it cover your stuff?
And you'd likely have then another condo loss assessment on top of that once everything is said and done. Absolutely. Go on Green Shirt right here.
So I work in architecture. And
Fabulous.
one thing that might change too is building code, because
typically building codes change when there's some disaster, and then you realize, oh, we shouldn't be doing it that way. We should do it this other way.
Yeah. That's why a lot of houses at the beach are on stilts, because then the first floor was flooded. Yes, it's that one little tiny shack that I use as a storage shed, but the main part of the house is 15, 20 feet above the ground.
And then you get Baba Yaga.
I'm
saying that like it's a bad thing.
Well, and Mr. Architect, I think that also applies to like if we start using like extraterrestrial material as well. Like if we start bringing in things from other planets to kind of help with the rebuild process, that's also going to affect that as well. No, right?
And also, then you're going to have super genius types like Reed Richards making new materials.
Yes.
And so it's like, we have super concrete now. And
what kind of
and if he's making materials and sell it, he better have insurance that covers his completed operations in case it fails.
But if we're mining these materials that are going to stop supervillains, what's going to stop me from using them to do more destruction?
Okay, well, how do you mean?
Like if we've got some sort of new steel, right, from space, and we're now using it to build buildings and protect from damage. What's going to stop me from trying to reverse engineer that technology and using it to make things more powerful?
Just going to be sort of an arms race.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. It's like an arms race of like, what?
A la Spider-Man Homecoming.
Yeah, yes, okay. Yeah, kind of that.
Okay.
I'm going blue right here.
All right. The government-sponsored superheroes.
Yes.
You got 3 government-sponsored superheroes show up to an active thing. How many of them actually do any work?
This is also a very interesting concept, because if you have 3, who's in charge of the response? And that makes me, this is one of my things I love to talk about. It makes me think about Waco and the response at Waco. You had 2 government agencies and no one knew who was in charge, and it was a whole thing. I could talk about 2 hours for that. So that's the other thing that we have to think about.
Well,
That might be
actually, in
next
the
year.
comic I was talking about, they have a rank structure in the team. So the highest ranking person is in charge, just like military. And they basically have it set up so that anything super related, they are the people in charge.
Here's the next spin-off short story: superhero union rep.
You got
That's
3 guys
amazing.
working on the side of the road. 2 of them are standing there.
Yeah.
One of them's doing all the work. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
came in
that's,
my head.
yeah.
I kind of want to write that now.
Blue hair?
So I had a question about, the circumstance in which heroes are, supported by the government in whatever capacity they are, and what might happen with heroes such as the Hulk that were involuntarily created, and not necessarily under control fully in that sense, and who might be responsible for the damage executed by that, whether it be like the person attached to them, so Bruce Banner in that circumstance, whether it be the people who are in charge of the experiments that caused the creation of the Hulk, and how insurance might deal with that.
I guess in the Hulk's case, it would be the army, wouldn't it?
Well, in the Hulk's case, like the initial rampage that he did when he first hulked out would probably fall on the people doing the experiment, because that's negligence on their part. Afterwards, if he goes around and hulks out again, that would be on him.
I think in a scenario where this could happen, like we would have insurance against what? Oh, we're performing these experiments, and now we have this green guy running around. Well, we had insurance covering us from. We could have insurance covering us from, unintended consequences. And I think if that's the kind of insurance that we have, if that's the kind of consequences, it comes back on Bruce, and he's probably ended up in some place like Red River or the woods from the boys.
Okay, here's another parallel for you. One of the things we get all the time in law enforcement bulletins, and this is a whole separate issue, and I'm not going to rant on it, I promise, but every week we get reports, usually multiple reports, of weapons stolen from vehicle. If the person who stole that weapon goes on to commit a crime, is the person whose weapon it was responsible, or is it the person who took the weapon responsible? And that might sort of parallel with the Hulk being created versus the damage he causes later.
When Bruce Banner isn't necessarily fully in control of that change, because he's not necessarily voluntarily shifting into the Hulk or using the weapon.
It would be the same as somebody who is schizophrenic and not in their right mind when they're going and slashing somebody up. You're still getting put in a hospital for the criminally insane.
So are we starting like a superhero defense of like, oh, well, it's okay that I destroyed this building and, 17 people died because I stopped these aliens and I saved the world? Where we have this sort of...
Or the superhero version of not guilty by reason of insanity.
Yeah,
that would be a really interesting thing to explore.
Not guilty by the reason of insanity. Well, yeah, you didn't get the criminal charges, but now you are going to a nice place with padded walls and getting much therapy and probably being drugged out of your mind so you can't do anything.
The majority of the people in costume could probably benefit from a good chunk of therapy.
Emotionally stable people do not put on tights and go beat people up.
One thing to keep in mind is that you made mention of when the Army was experimenting on Banner and that initial rampage. Governmental action is an exclusion, and I guarantee you that would fall under governmental actions. That's the thing. That's one of the interesting things you get into, where if you have state-sponsored superheroes, governmental action all day, every day.
Well, here's another twist on that. Banner wouldn't, comic version, not the movie version, Banner wouldn't have become the Hulk if it wasn't for Rick Jones. So is Rick liable for the damage the Hulk has?
I guarantee you. So if there was superhero insurance, if let's say my insurance company decided to cover the subrogate, who can I go after to get money back? Absolutely, they'll go after whoever they can go after. Anyone. All right, let me see. Can I see hands from people who haven't asked or put input yet, just so I try to, yes.
We talked about a lot of property damage.
Yes.
What about personal insurance, life insurance, anything covered? Like, we have several superheroes died several times.
I don't think most superheroes would be able to get life insurance, quite frankly.
So
they would probably be uninsurable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Run away.
I honestly, most superheroes would likely be uninsurable.
But like, what about medical insurance?
What if they had it before they became?
Like a broke, War
an interesting
Machine.
thought.
War Machine somehow getting money to get his legs restored, right, in the movie now. So, where is this money coming from?
It's nice to have rich friends.
Well, I mean, medical insurance will pay great sums of money.
I think that would be an argument of how the government would be, where the corruption would come in. Because I think there would be a bigger effort for the government sponsorship. Because someone like War Machine, who worked more for the military, would have that coverage that someone like a Tony wouldn't. Well, Tony could pay for it out of his own pocket.
Right. Yes.
But
so you say Sokovia Accord is part of a that whole process, bringing those superheroes under and getting all the government-controlled league.
I think the Sokovia Accords were a great example of this bad thing happened. We're going to do this now. Well, should we think this through? No!
If you signed the Sokovia Accords, work comp is a thing, so you might be covered under your workers' compensation insurance.
Go ahead, Brandy.
I was going to say, jumping off this idea of life insurance, what about all those did they pay out life insurance when all those people disappeared during the snap?
That's a fantastic question.
I actually thought about that.
I was like, we can't.
And do they have to pay that money back when they came back? Like,
I actually thought about that yesterday. I was like, I'm not going down that
road.
road.
The world was shut down. The world was shut down.
Because I thought about that, not even from the life insurance perspective, but that you now have half the people to rebuild with.
Yeah.
Like, you talk about costs. Materials will skyrocket because you have less people creating and providing materials, less people to build the buildings, all of that. I was like, holy heck, I would not want to live in the world of insurance during the snap.
I think that's next year's panel. We'll talk about this.
Yeah, no, seriously.
They touched on that as a joke in one of the Spider-Man movies and a lot more seriously in Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, because I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier is a great example. When Sam is back home and trying to just get his life together, that's a guy who would have easily been like a target for the government to say, we can make all your problems go away if you just work for us.
And they were like, you have no cover. Like, what were you doing the last 5 years?
Exactly.
I am going to try to get to as many of the remaining questions as I can. I know we started a little late, so I'm going to go right here in the white shirt. I love it. Let's go for it.
I just want to say really quick, what happened during the plague when lots of people disappeared, it wasn't exactly like what you think with the snap. Because the stuff was still there. So the people were gone, the stuff was still there. So actually created a middle class or whatever. But you guys talk a lot about but in the MCU in particular, things are escalating constantly, right? So there's mental health, there's physical health, there's got to be economic depression. To this point, I would like for you to think about like what is the breaking point? Because at some point, like governments, insurance, it requires participation from people. What happens when people are like, yeah, I don't have any jobs. Like there's a celestial that showed up. Like I don't know anything anymore. I can't trust in the future. I'm not buying into these systems anymore. Like this feels very like dystopia feels like around the corner.
Oh yeah.
So
Well, there's
is there a point where you can see there is a breaking point for like insurance or for these systems?
Oh yeah.
There's probably a reason that every single superhero story set in the future is dark and depressing.
Yeah.
And that may be part of
For
it,
sure.
and maybe part of how they get there. Is everything breaks down because of all the chaos they've caused all around the edges of everything.
And I think it would also have like a great impact on like society and like, because I mean, when I think about like the millennial generation, as much as we joke, we've been through so many different crises. We're like, oh, none of us are ever buying a house. None of us are ever really going to get married. None of us are ever really going to have the kids that we want. And so I think that like maybe the societal change would be so big that it would, I don't know if it would drive those companies to kind of try to bridge that gap and make sure that it didn't happen, or if it would kind of make it worse.
Or it would just be a cyberpunk dystopia where the people who were, had money could still get insurance, and the people who didn't have money, well, I hope you like Robitussin for everything that you might be sick with, because that's all you can afford.
I think what you might see if you got to a breaking point like that is something that already exists very much so in this world, and that's the idea of self-insurance in communities.
Yep.
The Amish do it.
That'd be huge.
They completely self-insure.
Yep.
They create community funds which pay for all, repairs for buildings. If there is some sort of medical need that someone needs to go seek outside medical attention, they do that. And I actually think that is something you could see if we got to the point where people started rebelling.
That's really popular in the Middle East too, in like the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
And I think there's
you
one
thought
other...
the homeowners association was bad now.
Now they control your health care.
And I think there's one other possibility too, which is I think that is the dystopian future where everyone just hits the breaking point. I think that opens the door for someone like a Dr. Doom or a Darkseid to be the singular God figure to say, I will end this all.
There's a reason why people in Latveria love Dr. Doom.
Yes. Who is the figure that can end all of this for us, this constant fighting, and we'll just be under your rule if that means we don't have to think or worry about this every single day.
When they're written correctly, that's one of the reasons that both Dr. Doom and Ra's al Ghul are such compelling characters, because they're not only saying the world would be better under my rule, they actually have some valid points.
Yeah.
They can back it up.
I mean, Magneto was right.
Yeah.
I'm going to go right there. Yes, you.
Going back to superheroes getting insurance themselves, like the superhero malpractice insurance.
Love it.
I could see how that would work if like they didn't have a secret identity, like everyone who knows who they are, like Tony Stark. But like in the cases of superheroes that would have secret identities, there's like two things that I keep thinking about is first, how would they even be able to verify their identity since they're secret? For all insurance companies know it's just some person in a costume that's not the actual person that's showing up and is like, hey, I'm trying to put a claim. And second, in a superhero malpractice insurance implies that superheroes are able to be sued, but like if they have a secret identity, how are they going to be able to be sued? How are they going to track them down to sue them?
Didn't
they? In
Like
court,
he's suing John Doe.
in costume, in the comics, he went to court in costume because he was being sued.
Yeah, same in The Incredibles. Doesn't he show up? He show up to court in his costume.
Spider-Man, it's not just some other person.
Well, when he was crawling up the side of the chair,
it would have to be displayed.
So we're going to do one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. And I'm going to go right here because you have been very patiently waiting.
I'm just curious how privatization of superheroes would impact insurance. I would operate under the assumption that
You think
capitalism
corporations
still
are
exists.
bad now?
Yeah. We now have 12 vaults.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I'm curious how, let's say, our Justice League becomes a superhero conglomerate that then hires down and trickles down lower and higher levels of superhero. I guess you would insure the Justice League.
You would insure them like a business, basically. Yeah.
So how many points do I need in the Justice League Union to cover for that, to get that insurance?
I don't know. Ask SAG-AFTRA. I mean,
the hero world that I write in, it's a really bizarrely developed world because it's got a very long backstory to it that I won't bore you with. But there's an organization in there called the Paladin Program. And the two things they do are train people when their powers first manifest. And then in the background, they're the ones helping you out with, like, okay, I was fighting this bad guy in New York, or we ended up in Japan. Can I have a hand getting home, please? Because I don't have a passport, or I didn't have it on me when this happened. And they take care of a lot of the legal and economic and other complications that come along. You would need some organization like that if, think about any complication from any normal hero thing. Mm-hmm. There's going to be paperwork that your average person is not equipped to deal with. There's going to be some poor insurance or reconstruction or something person somewhere absolutely cannot figure out. I mean, there's levels of complications for everything. I mean, 20 years ago, no one would be arguing in traffic court about this guy hit me because he was looking at his phone and not driving. The law is a constantly evolving thing. Society is evolving along next to it, not always as fast as it needs to. So there would be a lot of complications along those lines, I expect.
Yeah. Yep. I would love to keep this going, but we do have to. So I'm going to have everybody here just where they can find you, either for the rest of the weekend or on the internet.
Cool.
Start down.
I'm Stuart Grosse. I do villains as protagonists. I have bookmarks to take you to some of my stories. I will be here, I believe, at 10 tomorrow morning, talking about ultra-violence and superhero
Goes
media.
right with this.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for coming out. You can find me at the Alliance Theater right here in Atlanta, Georgia, at alliancetheater.org.
I'm some version of Wayland Smith and all of the social media stuff, except Twitter. Some bastard beat me, so I'm Wayland Smith 1 over there. I also have bookmarks and cards up here if you want to get in touch at some point. My books are for sale on Amazon and various other places. As I said, I write up hero stuff on the site comicbookclog.com, and I'm one of the very few writers I know that actually has good experiences on Goodreads, so I'm very active over there.
Love it.
Awesome. So you guys can find me at my website, which is just my last name, then my first name.com. And it has links to everything. My blog, my thesis is on there, some other presentations that I've done that are very fun, just like this. This has been such a great conversation. I'm so excited that we got to do this. The only other thing that I have this weekend is a Handmaid's Tale panel meetup from 7 to 9 over in the West End. If you go in the Apocalypse Rising room and you're surrounded by people in blue suits with like gold stripes, you're in the Fallout room. Join us in the other one. Unless you also like Fallout. Drop in, drop out. Awesome.
And I'm Jeni. You can find me basically on all social media at Jeni and spelled out juice. And I like cocktails.
I like that.
And I will be, next thing I'm involved in, I will be on the Outer Range panel over in the Cortland at 4 o'clock. And then, friends, if you want to join us tonight, we'll be doing at 10 o'clock, Heroes, Villains, and Humanity. Let's raise some money for the Arthritis Foundation. If you enjoyed this panel, 5 stars. If you didn't, 5 sarcastic stars, if you could, please. And if you feel like dropping some donations in the back on the way out. You have all been amazing. Thank you for such a lively discussion, y'all. I appreciate you